It is a wonderful honor to welcome Buck Angel to this podcast. He is a speaker, entrepreneur, and educator, known primarily for his hot takes on the trans debate, uh, whose hot takes that I very much appreciate. So,
Thank
welcome,
you.
Buck, to this podcast.
Oh, thank you, my friend. It's super nice to meet you. I appreciate you reaching out to me. It means a lot to me that you're seeing what I'm doing. As you know, what you just said is so true.
Yeah, and thank you very much for coming along. Well, I'm not a trans person, but I find myself increasingly concerned about the tenor as well as the tone in which English language media is discussing this right now. And I find that you share the same concerns and you have more firsthand experience in that field than I am. So it's
Yeah,
wonderful to have you on once again.
thank you, my friend. I appreciate that you hear what I'm trying to say out there, and I'm very concerned. Right along with you.
I should add that you, Buck Angel, are also a trans man. You've make an eclectic living as a trans man, specifically an adult film star. So,
Mhm.
why don't you give us a brief history into that particular journey of yours?
Sure. So I want you to let you know that I'm no longer in that adult industry that way. But back in I think I did that like 20 years ago. I actually created the genre. My mom is so happy. I created the genre of trans male pornography. And at the time, it really did help me. It was before really the internet was so actually even part of that. I was more making films like DVD and remember DVD. I even started in the VHS world. So I started in the pornography space and then eventually grew from that to become more of a public speaker. I was seen through my pornography, which I find to be quite fascinating. As you know, most of the world is not very okay with pornography. And I understand why, but it is a genre and it is a thing that needs to be, as far as I'm concerned, it can help some people. It can also be dangerous, just like many kinds of things. But that being said, I moved from that into I create products now, sexual wellness products, mostly for the trans and LGBT community. And then from there, I became a public speaker through my pornography. And from there, I kind of moved out of porn. I did it. I'm kind of the guy who puts my hands in things and then decides that I want to move forward onto something else. So yeah, I did, and I am connected to the pornography business.
Mhm. Yeah. So, how would you make the case, so to speak,
Mm.
for pornography as a whole?
Yeah, great question. So like I said, I don't think it's for everybody, and that's why I think it's an important space because for myself specifically, it really helped me connect to my body. That is not a normal body for a quote unquote man. I was born female. I'm a biological female who transitioned to live and look like a man. I never changed my sex. So with that, I present as male, but I still have female genitalia. And so it was very difficult for me to have sex and to sort of explore my body sexually because I shamed myself by not having male genitalia. And so through my own exploration with my body and realizing like I don't have to feel so shamed about my unique body. I can celebrate it. And I found that pornography was a space for me that people didn't object to it. I was able to talk about it and I was able to create my own films and I was able to do my own narrative. And on some level, other people started to see me and other people who are like myself started to see me and not necessarily trans people, but all kinds of people who have body issues or not comfortable in their body really started to celebrate my pornography as a means of sort of pushing back on the world that we don't all look and act the same. And it was very amazing for me. I'll tell you, it really did help me, pardon me, connect to myself and many other people. And so, like I said, it's not for everybody, but you have to also remember that it's pretty much the Wild West pornography. And you can make anything, legally, that's not underage, but you can pretty much go on there and do whatever you need to do. And not everybody's going to like the things you do. But I think what the thing I'm trying to say here is that it's very important that whether or not you like it or dislike it, you don't ever have to watch it and you don't ever have to click on it. And I think that's the part we're missing is that this is an adult space. I make movies for adults and it's adult only, and adult can look at it or not look at it. And that's like, I think with lots of things I don't like, I'm not going to click on it because I don't like it and I don't want to see it. So I hope that makes sense. It's why I like to call it adult entertainment,
Mhm.
because it's specifically for one thing only. And on some level, my pornography did become political on some level, but at the same time, it also is entertainment for people who want to sort of enjoy themselves and see things that make them um, get turned on, for a lack of a better expression.
Mhm. I guess one more follow-up before we move away from the topic of
Mhm.
pornography. I don't want to
Sure.
waste this entire
Sure.
conversation on it. But yeah, I think the judgmental attitude that most people, whether
Yeah.
they are porn watchers or not, have against pornography is that
Mhm.
it, like gambling or alcohol or drugs, is a vice, and
Mhm.
it is very, very easy to uh, be on the path to abusing it.
Mhm. I mean, so I've seen people come to me and say, I'm addicted to pornography and it's your fault. I mean, people have actually said that to me. So if you don't know, I'm actually a recovering alcoholic and drug addict. So 30 years of sobriety. So that being said, I gonna say that, as adults, we need to start taking um, responsibility for ourselves. Addiction is a real thing. And addiction, you can have an addiction to all kinds of things: food, alcohol, sex, right? Collecting things. There could be so many. So, that being said, I think we need to talk about this as an addiction. And I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. 100% it does. But why does it happen? So, I'm the guy that wants to look at why it's happening and how can we help people who become addicted to pornography. I don't think getting rid of it is going to help, because the problem with that is with anything, right? With legalization of alcohol, you stop it from becoming a underground market, which is way worse. And you don't want pornography to go back in the closet. You don't want that, because I'll tell you right now, we already have problems with child trafficking and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be out of control. There'll be no way to rein that in, if that makes sense. So addiction is a thing. And I think addiction, you need to understand why you have an addiction to that. And you need to take care of it on your own and sort of own up to your own addiction.
Mhm. Yeah, I have a quasi-libertarian attitude to vice and such.
Yeah.
We should keep them legal to an extent. Those who want to
Yeah.
access it can access it. I think I would go so far as to say that even like really dangerous drugs, but
Yeah.
as a society, we have to promote a culture in which these things can be wanted but not needed.
That's right. Totally agree with you. So that's what I'm trying to do. You don't need my pornography, but if you want to go and find it, it's there for you, right? Addiction is horrible. I was addicted, so it was horrible, and I took care of it on my own turn. And I got, you know what I mean? I helped myself, and I think that's the message I want to give people out there. People have to learn how to take responsibility for their actions. I think we're not teaching that, especially to a younger generation. Like I'm not forcing you to watch my films. They're there, they're accessible to you, but it doesn't mean that it should be accessible to everybody. And it also means that if you don't want to watch it, you shouldn't have to watch it.
Oh yeah. So moving on to what you're currently doing now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you need another advocate for what you're doing, but not the not the
Always.
not the porn thing, but your dissension, so to speak. I would
Yeah.
say that you come fully packaged with the attitude of I'm here to help when it comes to
Mhm.
trans people navigating their journey, as well as non-trans people like myself trying to figure out what their journey entails. And I know that you've been receiving a lot of backlash because of it, mostly from the high priests and priestesses of the LGBTQ plus establishment. So I fully sympathize with you.
I mean, look at me. You think I care about those people? I trend. I mean, it's hurtful. I won't deny that, especially being I transitioned 31 years ago, right? And I've been pretty much at the forefront of championing specifically for trans male rights. And to have a community that I have worked very hard with and been very upfront and open to the world about myself, and traveled the world over many times speaking to all kinds of people, to have the community I've advocated for such a long time to turn on me, with pitchforks and fire. And I feel like that Frankenstein movie, right? I feel like they're all coming coming at me. And it is hurtful, but at the same time, I got to this space on my own. I didn't have a community back in the day when I transitioned. So I think because of that, I have always been sort of an individual and a person who's been outspoken and somebody who does live under my own terms. Just because I'm transsexual, that doesn't make me have to like everyone who's transsexual or agree with something that I see. Does that make sense? Like just because
Yeah.
I'm that doesn't mean I have to side with something that I totally disagree with. So, it's just part of my advocating and activism is to push back against things that I see that I feel are wrong.
Mhm. So, if this doesn't get too personal, I'd
No.
like you to briefly discuss your own journey as a
Mhm.
transsexual man.
Oh no, nothing's personal. Honestly, I'm very open. I'm an open book, and I don't feel like I can't answer anything. So I just want you to know that. And thanks for asking and being respectful of that. But that being said, so I'm 61 years old, and I grew up in Southern California here in Los Angeles, and born in the 60s and 70s kid, which I have to tell you was amazing. I did not have a bad childhood. I was born I'm a biological female. I was born female. I was pretty much a tomboy. It was in the 70s. Nobody cared about stuff like that. It was just like, you're this. I didn't struggle. I'll be honest. The things I struggled with were people teasing maybe, right? But I was raised as a fighter. So like my dad would say, if he hits first, you hit back. So I was that little girl who was that little boy who nobody messed with because I was like, rah. But the thing that happened was puberty, and I think getting into my 16 and 17 years of old, dealing with myself. And back in the 70s, we didn't have what you see today. I didn't even have the internet, thank God. But yeah, I struggled as a teenager, which I think everyone kind of struggles as a teenager. I'm not going to say it's specifically trans related. Blah blah blah. I sort of get into the drugs and alcohol as a youth, and that takes me out. I didn't graduate high school. I became lost and looked for places. I ended up being in the gay women's scene and living as a butch woman for a number of years, always kind of struggling in the back of my head with, I feel like a man. I feel like a man. And there wasn't any help for me on that. So I just lived as a butch woman until finally I found a therapist who said, well, let's explore this. And through her, we explored it. And I found a doctor who was willing to give me testosterone. I was his first patient, and he called me a guinea pig. And he said, I've never done this. It's like experiment. You are a total experiment. We're going to try this. Are you okay with it? But remember, I was 30 years old. I was not a child. I was a 30-year-old adult who really did live a life on some level prior to who I am today. And I think that really helped me. 30 years ago, I transitioned. I've never looked back. I've been solid in my transition. And so with that, it's why I sort of advocate with my story that says, I did struggle as a kid and I didn't have the access to the things a lot of people have today. And here I am today. I went through alcoholism, drug addiction, just wanting to kill myself on some level, like so many different arenas that I think are important to humans. Humans have to go through things and struggle and go up and down and around because you're never going to be flatlined. It's just, I don't care, even after you transition, you're still going to struggle with certain things in your life. So my story really is basically coming to terms with my gender and my sex and trying to find a space to get to be this person 30 years ago. And it's been an incredible journey for me. And it's why I speak up today. I'll be honest with you. It's why I do, because I see things that are not trans and that are not here to help trans people, but are here to, I don't know, it's kind of scary to do some. I feel like there's a manipulation happening.
And I think the world's made a more wonderful place thanks to you coming out, speaking out, and
Ah,
speaking up.
thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, how did you become, so to speak, a dissenter in this
Mm.
current discourse?
Yeah, I love that word dissenter. Yes, it really is. It's so interesting. How it happened was I'm always honest about this. I was seeing these young people calling themselves trans. On back in the day, it was what's that, Tumblr, I think it was, and some of the other sort of platforms early on in the social media. And I was like, am I just old? Right? Am I just being an old grumpy trans guy like these dumb kids? But I was like, something made me a little concerned. So I stepped, being the older guy, I step back, let the kids kind of find their space. And then, I'm like, I started hearing this. You don't need gender dysphoria to be trans. And I'm like, what? That's like saying you don't need cancer to have cancer, right? Or you don't need this diagnosis. You can just self ID of having cancer. And I'm like, wait, self ID? That was the minute I said, uh-oh. And it just snowballed, my friend, because when I did it, I had to go through a doctor, 2 years of hardcore therapy. I had to live as a man without transitioning. I had to do so many things just to make sure that I was solid. Thank God I did all those things. Like I said, I've never looked back, and I have such an amazing transition. We're not doing that now. We're telling anyone who says they're trans or they're trans, we're telling young kids. When I transitioned, kids didn't transition. We tried to help kids get out of the dysphoria. I feel like we're pushing kids into dysphoria, and the medicalization is rampant with these young people. And then I started seeing detransitioners, which I said, this is going to happen. I knew it. They're being told they're trans with no therapy and no long-term sort of look at them and trying to find out they could have other comorbidities, right? They could be dealing with anxiety, depression. One of the big things is BPD and all these different things going on that they're not even addressed. They're just saying if a kid says they're trans, and we have to listen to them. I'm like, what? No kid at 10 knows who they are. So those things really upset me. And I'm like, we are doing a disservice to these young people. This is not joy. I'm not happy being a trans person. I am a trans person, but it's just my medical condition. I don't live as this trans. I live as a man. I don't live as a trans. These are all these things that I'm like, what's happening here? These kids are taking the identity of trans. And I don't identify as trans. I identify as a male. And that's the difference between me and them. So I started seeing this push these kids into a medicalized space at 14, at 13, they're having their breasts cut off. I'm like, that was it for me, my friend. I was like, nope, I'm an elder, and it is my responsibility as an elder who has been so like really happy in my space to speak up. And that was the beginning of the downfall of me being sort of quote unquote sort of hero in this community. Now I'm no longer that. Now I'm a dissenter, I'm a transphobe, I'm a bigot, I'm a Nazi. I don't even know what else they've been calling me these days because I won't go along with it.
Yeah, so more on the topic of dissenter. So I'm sitting
Yeah.
in the country of Hungary now, and if you don't
Mhm.
mind a brief history lesson. Today is the 23rd of October, which in Hungary is the National Day of the October Revolution of 1956. So is where the communist government of Hungary, um, with the help of student protesters, they led a resistance movement against the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
But after a few weeks, the Soviet Union won, so to speak, but they didn't
Okay.
they didn't win in the long term. Freedom came
Right.
to Hungary, and the Soviet Union is reduced to the ash heap of history. But I was thinking of today, as I've read through what happened. I was thinking about how in America at that time, uh, probably because of McCarthyism or
Mhm.
because of the anti-communist fervor, the
Mhm.
West did nothing to aid the freedom fighters because they they were communists, which they
Mhm.
were. But um, there comes a time when you face something so atrociously bad that you kind of need to form allyships with people who you would not agree with. Um, so hence that explains me, someone who calls himself a conservative,
Right. Right.
non-porn star, non-trans person, talking to you, trans man, former avant-garde adult male film star, to discuss this because, like you, I'm genuinely horrified by this, and I I think there's the first layer of horror, seeing what's being done in the name of advocating trans rights and all that. But
Mhm.
the second degree of horror comes from the idea that those who share my feelings and are willing to speak out about it are being put down, like unjustly, unfairly, instead of having their voice heard.
Right. That's right. So no, I'm all about allyship, and with, I'm not a conservative. I would say, I would always consider myself a liberal. But these days I'm scared. I'm not, I guess if in the context of what I'm seeing happening, I'm not that anymore. Well, I guess now it's moved over to left, right? I think liberal and left are two different things. I
Yeah.
do not belong to what they're calling here. Maybe, I don't know if they say it there, but woke, right? This to me, it's far left, just like the far right. They're the same insane people who are so ideological, so stuck in their ways, so mean and angry. That's not me. That's not my nature. I'm a bridge builder. Like I said, I've traveled the world talking to people who would never speak to me ever, and change people's minds. And me and you, we probably come from completely, clearly different spaces. But I would say on some level, if me and you don't come together, we're in for a bad situation happening. And that's why I appreciate people like you reaching out to me. We would never meet. We would probably never sit in the same circles. But here we are talking to each other because we have major concerns for the children. And that's what I want to keep reiterating here. I can't tell an adult to do anything. They have the total access to do whatever they need to do. And it should be that way. But for a child, and no adults are standing up for them, specifically in the trans community, you can stand up all you want, but you're not trans, right? So it's different when your own sort of people stand up and go against the grain. It causes people to say, hey, wait a minute here. If Buck Angel, who's a transsexual man of 30 years, is saying this, that's why my voice is important, friend, because people, as much as the trans community is trying to block my voice, it's seeping through. Look at me and you are sitting here today. And I think it's so important that you and I understand our conversation is about specifically, I think, the children, and nobody's advocating for them. They're just like scared to say something, but these are children. They're not adults. These are 10, 12, 13-year-old little girls doing irreversible surgeries on themselves. And mark my words here today, we are going to have lawsuits. We are going to have young kids so messed up. I mean, I don't even want to vision what these young people are going to be like in 10 years when they realize they made a huge mistake. And where were the adults in the room? So I do value these conversations, and I value you reaching out to me, because this is how you and I are going to help these kids not be put in and I like to say it's an experimental space. You know that. This is all experimental.
Oh yeah. Um, so before we reach the trans issue, the main topic of the
Yeah.
day, I
Yeah.
just want to say that there's one thing that's lacking in, well, what I know to be English language or Western political
Yeah.
discourse,
Yeah.
is this idea that as members of the moderate, and I mean both the moderate left and the moderate right,
Mhm.
um, instead of uh, instead of taking some responsibility or doing the necessary deed to criticize the extremes of your own faction, you treat the extremes of the other faction as if they comprise the entire faction. So it's
Excellent.
the idea that all liberal to left people think
Right.
all conservatives are Trump supporting January 6th
Right.
rioters, or all members of the right thinking the left is all about the squad and
Mhm.
progressive gender doctrine.
That's
And
right.
I don't think that's what political discourse is
No.
or should be about.
I agree with you 100%. And it's why I always say because they'll come at me and they'll be like, you're just right wing, right wing. I'm like, but I'm a liberal. That should make you even more scared. I'm not right wing. And don't call me that. And so you're right. There's this idea that if you're against your people, I guess I'm a lack of a better expression, then you're not them. Does that make sense? Like if you're not for transitioning children, then you're not really trans or you're transphobic. I get called transphobic constantly. It's just ridiculous behavior. But you see what they're doing? I know exactly what they're doing. They're manipulating, gaslighting, trying to shut people down who are dissenters or who are sort of raising the red flag. And I think that's just a shame that it's become so black and white now, right? If you go against, you're this. If you go against them, it's just ridiculous behavior. And I think in America, I think that's why a lot of people are leaving these parties. They're leaving the Republican Party. They're also leaving the Democratic Party. And many of us are sort of in this holding pattern in the middle, because even though we have different possible political, there are things that we agree with more that make us not want to belong to those two parties.
Yeah, and the way I see it, both parties are mistaken about what to do about, the trans rights movement.
Yeah.
One is going full extreme affirmation, and the others going full on extreme rejection.
That's
Now,
right.
I like to mm, I like to bring an example of I think Jazz Jennings, I believe. I recently read a story of her, and she, as well as a handful of other figures, are being made celebrities and this vanguard for this new trans movement. And as far as I can tell, Jazz Jennings was transitioned as a kid, and she's being made as a poster child for children being transgender. I think perhaps my most sympathetic reading, and believe me, I have to try really hard to come up with a sympathetic reading for this, is that I'm sure for people who are gay and lesbian and transgender like yourself, when you were children and you discover this fact about yourself, you were shunned by your family and your peer group. So, in order to spare future generations of LGBT, whatever that means anymore,
Sure.
kids
Yeah.
from feeling bad about themselves,
Mhm.
they go for affirmation. So, what do you suppose to be like this healthy approach to children once they discover this fact about themselves?
Well, so it's not that complicated. Let kids be kids. I'm serious. I'm not kidding. I didn't learn to be trans, nor did I learn to be gay, right? Because I was a gay woman for many years. Those things are naturally in, homosexuality is in you. You're born with it. You're not taught to be. Same with transsexualism. It's a mental disorder. I will push against these people saying it's not a mental disorder till I'm blue in the face. It is a mental disorder. It is not normal, quote unquote, normal for a woman to feel like she wants to live as a man, nor is it. And it's a very small group. It's always been very small. This isn't a lot. So all of a sudden now it's exploded. So with that and children, I think children need to find their space by just letting them be. When we start teaching these things in school, we put thoughts in people's heads that might have never had those thoughts before. And maybe they're struggling with other sort of comorbidities or anxiety or all kinds of stuff going on with kids. I have an 11-year-old. I'm a dad. I have an 11-year-old son, and they go through all kinds of changes and things. And I don't necessarily think we need to be putting LGBT stuff in, schools of sixth graders or fifth graders. I don't think that's healthy. I think high school, maybe talking to them about these kinds of things, but I think it's such a small group of people. We're acting like half the world is LGBT. It's not. It's literally, it will always be that small. It is that small. Now, that being said, I want to let you know this. If somebody decides they want to be gay, right? No harm, and they decide that that's the wrong space for them, no harm. You can literally go back to living as a straight person. But we're talking about medicalization of kids. They're not just putting a hat on and saying, oops, never mind. I don't like that hat. I don't want to live on it anymore. And then you just go back to living as little Susie. We're putting medications in these kids' bodies at 10 and 11 years old that are irreversible, the damage. So my point with that is that if you just let kids be and even sort of let them find their space, they're not struggling with their their stuff at that age. They're not. Kids go through all kinds of stuff. I'm telling you, I didn't struggle as a kid. One day I had to live as a girl. One day I could be in my boy clothes, right? That was how my parents sort of, yeah, we're going to go to church. You got to put on the dress. Oh, I hated it because I wanted to wear boy clothes. But then I put the boy clothes on when I got home and I felt sort of okay again, if that makes sense. I found my space through struggle on some level. I think am I making sense? Like I just
Oh, yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think we need to, we're not that big of a population, number one. Number two, I just don't think kids are so much struggling with these things as much as we're trying to make it seem they are. There might be one out of how many kids that might be having some dysphoria, but not 50 of the kids in school. That's just, the numbers are insane. The numbers are wrong. I'm telling you, they're wrong.
And I think an issue that is under discussed that I think I would like to discuss
Yeah.
whenever I can is that this style of transgender advocacy is reinforcing gender stereotypes.
There you go. There
Yeah.
you go. That's right. 100%. That's why I'm so against it. How dare you? You know, my parents raised three girls, okay? I remember I'm a biological woman, but that being said, they raised three girls. And all of us are butch, you know, very masculine women, very like trait of males, right? Why can't women be that way? My sisters both went on to live as straight women with families, very successful in their businesses. They're not trans. We were all raised in the same space. We were all raised to be very sort of non-typical girls. My dad didn't want us to be weak, you know, or that way. We were stand up to people and be that way. And so that's what we're missing here. We're missing this idea that a woman can't be masculine or a man can't be, or a boy, if he's feminine today, oh, must be trans. Or if it's a girl who wants to have a short haircut and pants, oh, must be trans. You know how hard we worked to get rid of those stereotypes? We worked so hard that, you know, kids didn't have to be struggling with that identity. And now we're just regressing. Trans kids is a regressing. It's regressing to back to gender stereotypes.
Mhm. And I think there's another flip side to this increasing pedagogy of
Mm.
LGBTQ, whatever it is that, well, one, they can use it to, well, teach, or should I say, indoctrinate children
That's
into
right.
thinking along these terms, these lines. But it also is working in favor of the teachers too, who
Mm.
already themselves believe in these ideas, and they, well, I mean, if you would put it in the most cynical light possible, they're trying to,
Mm.
you know, create a new generation of themselves, since gays and lesbians cannot reproduce naturally.
Yeah.
And maybe in the most sympathetic light possible, you can say that, well, they're trying to inoculate children against like homophobic, transphobic description. But
Yeah.
I see that you're shaking your head against that. But yeah, so tell me about how so.
Well, I see it's indoctrination. Let's just be real here. It's indoctrination. You know, to tell a child that they can change their sex is a lie. I never changed my sex. I'm still a biological female. And it's why I'm very okay with myself, because I'm not pretending. I'm not pretending to you or anybody. I know exactly who I am, and I know exactly how to walk the world, and I know exactly what to expect and not to expect. But when you're telling a child, and when you have teachers, okay, man, that stuff makes me so mad. How dare teachers bring their own personal business into the classroom? Since when are we doing that? I don't know how old you are, but when I was in school, man, teachers didn't talk about their private life. They didn't come with an agenda. They didn't come saying, you know, well, I'm this, and this is how you'll talk to me. And that, no, that's, you're supposed to be teaching the kids math, science, music, whatever else, right? Instead, now they're coming with flags in the room, and you know, my pronouns are X, Y, and Z. And then what? Since when are we telling children that this kind of stuff, and that you can just automatically, you know, say that you're a girl when you're a boy? That's confusing to young people. And so that feels like indoctrination to me. It 100% does. And when we start forcing parents, you know, I live in California, where they were trying to pass a law that if you don't affirm your child's gender choice at 10, when your kid is going, I'm a boy, not a girl, and if you don't affirm it, you know that they were going to try to pass a law that you could take the child away from the parents for not affirming their gender. That's crazy. That's crazy. That to me is actual child abuse, because you don't know what's going on in that household, and you don't know. It's my job as a parent, unless I'm a horrible parent, right? And I'm actually physically abusing these kids, but they're acting like not affirming gender is abuse when it's not abuse. You don't know what's going on in that house, and you don't understand what was going on with that kid. Parents care about their children. And the last thing, I'm going to say it here, this is the part where people don't like for me to say that. The whole point is to get a kid out of dysphoria, not to bring them into it. The whole point is to try to get them to grow out of being trans. You don't want a kid to be trans. You don't want a kid. This is not a life of ease. I have to shoot testosterone all the time. I have to always be aware of who I am. It's not that joy fun that they try to sort of express out. You see what they're doing? They're laying like a little line of cherries. Follow these cherries, kids. And at the end of that, you're going to be this magical unicorn. And guess what? They realize they're not going to be the magical unicorn. And who's dealing with these kids who are detransitioning? 16-year-old girls who cut their breasts off and took hormones and look like me, but they don't feel like me. They feel like girls, and now their whole life is ruined. It was the detransitioners that really lit a fire under me. And I said, I cannot stand this. These kids are being completely destroyed. And if nobody stands up to this, what are we going to do in 10 years when we have hundreds of kids who are just completely, not only physically hurt, but mentally hurt?
I spent some time living in Canada when I was doing undergraduate
Ugh.
studies, and I think if what you're witnessing in America is, drives you crazy, spare a thought on what the Canadians are going through over
No, I know my dad's Canadian, by the way. But that being said, oh, believe me, I have my eyes on Canada. They went way off they went way off the rails, man.
Yeah, I've heard plenty of stories about how parents have had their children taken away from them. And the thing is, they're all parents of British Columbia, which is the wokest of the Canadian provinces.
That's right.
Yeah. So
It's very sad. I mean, what do we think we're doing here?
mhm.
First off, do you know how gross that is to take a child away from their parents? How dare you? Number one, we already have people suffering who don't have kids, who don't have families. And like, that is not child abuse. It is child abuse to take the child away from his family. It is not child abuse to say, hey, wait a minute, kiddo. Maybe you're not trans. Maybe you're just a girl who likes to wear pants. Let's try to figure this out on our. That's loving. It's loving and caring to sit with your child and say, I love you, I care about you, but I don't think you're trans. But if you are, we're going to figure it out, but we're going to take our time. That's loving, not forcing a parent. I just did an interview, friend, and it's going up to maybe today or tomorrow. I'll send you the link. I got the most incredible interview. You're going to love it. I interviewed a young woman, trans woman. She's 22 years old. At the age of 10, they told her she was trans because she was a very feminine boy. And then they put her on Lupron, the puberty blocker. And then they put her on cross-sex hormones. She looks like a woman. There's no doubt. But now at 22, and they told her that they were going to change her. And they said these words: you are going to become a cisgender woman. What? So anyway, long story short, she gets vaginoplasty. It's the most horrible thing ever. She doesn't have the growth because of the puberty blockers, right? So they have to make her vagina through her stomach. They just completely destroyed her whole body. And then now she can live as a woman, but it all crashed. The whole vagina thing crashed. She couldn't get it fixed. They said, we can't fix it or you'll die. So now she has no sexual functioning. She can never reproduce. She's so sad. She wants to come out and tell the world that the worst thing that ever happened to her was transitioning as a child.
Mhm.
I have actual real dialogue with these people. I'm not just like sort of, whimsically making these things up. I have dialogue with these people who are coming out and saying it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Why couldn't I have just been an effeminate man for a while? Why couldn't I have lived? Now I'll never have sex. I'll never know what it's like. Can you imagine? And I'll never be able to procreate. I'll never be able to have babies. She said at 14, they asked her, would you like to save your eggs? And At 14, do you think any 14-year-old is gonna, or I'm sorry, or your sperm? You can't ask a 14-year-old stuff like that.
Mhm. I
Shocking.
yeah, I of course you have I'm sure you are familiar with the Chinese Cultural Revolution as much as I am.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I mean this with no hint of hyperbole, but
Mhm.
I think the hallmark of all radical movements is to to have children pick a side between the ideologues and the parents. And I think this is what the advocates of
Yep.
the activists and the clinicians or the doctors, so to speak, are doing. They're trying to pick pitch kids against their parents.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
which
right.
if you live in China during 1968 or whatever, you know how well that turned out.
Oh my God, I say it all the time. I'm like, do you people even know history? They don't. That's the other scary thing. They're totally pushing these kids, and I watch them. This is the scary part. All these applications, right? The social. I do believe social media has created a social contagion. I watch it. I'm on there. I watch how these kids are just so. I'm trans. I'm trans. I'm trans. I'm like, what do you even mean by that, right? And then hate your parents. Adults hate you, and they push them against me. They're also pushing the kids against me. I'm old. They tell me I'm old. Sit down. We don't do it like that anymore. I'm like, yeah, we do. And you sit down. I'm 61. You're 20. Are you insane? Or 16, even 16-year-olds. They're so angry at the world. And they're being indoctrinated into that hate. And it's why I have to come back and say, why are you all so hateful? Transitioning should make you happy. Transitioning should make you want to be so happy and help the world and become a good person. If it wasn't for my transition, I wouldn't be, an entrepreneur. I have my own businesses. I have a family. I have the most amazing life I could ever even imagine after coming from that. I don't see the same thing. So I think you're right. They're indoctrinating these young people into a thought process so they become part of the mob. They have mob mentality. And if you go against them, it's like, it's so obvious. And I don't understand how other people can't see it or they don't want to see it.
So I think one of the very good news that I think the LGBT plus, if I ever read about them, fail to mention is that in the year 2020 there was the Supreme Court case of let me check, Bostock versus Clayton County, which the ruling was that employers cannot discriminate based on a person's gender identity, so whether they
Mm,
are homosexual or transsexual.
mm,
Now, the Supreme Court justice who delivered the majority opinion is Neil Gorsuch, who
mm.
was appointed by none other than Donald Trump. So people
That's
who
right.
say Donald Trump is transphobic or whatnot,
Nope.
should look into that.
That's right. That's right. But here again, my friend, me and you can spit facts all day long. We can actually have actual facts. Nope. They will ride over it. They will say things and try to manipulate. Gaslighting should be the word of 2023. I'm not kidding. Like everything is gaslit. Everything is trying to manipulate people's thought process. And, younger generation are easy. They're easy to manipulate. And, you can say that's not true. That's Donald Trump. He's a Nazi. He hates everybody. Like you could easily do that and get people to be like thinking that we've had this hate against us forever. And I'm like, you people should have lived 30 years ago. Let me tell you, the amount of stuff LGBT community has is unbelievable. We have so many rights here. As a trans person, I have so many rights. And for some reason, they see the glass half empty and I see the glass half full. And I think that's because I come from a space of not having it, right? So now I have it and I see it where they don't come from that. They only come from this idea that they don't have it. When they can have insurance pay for their surgery, you can get hormones on the internet. You can, you know what I mean? You can literally be 16 years old and walk into Planned Parenthood and transition with a 20-minute appointment. It's absurd.
Now, I've certainly danced around this topic, but I'm increasingly skeptical of what is now being called the LGBTQ plus community, mainly because they keep adding things. Right now, I know that among the absurdities is that people who are quote unquote asexuals are now being
Oh
added,
God.
despite the fact that I don't think asexuals have ever been like legally or even culturally discriminated in any
No,
ways.
no.
So it's I think it's become kind of like a weird scam that
Oh yeah,
unfortunately too
yeah,
many like big companies are being buy into. I think
that's
whatever
right.
Pride Month is, I think it's
That's
a
right.
corporate scam.
I agree. 100. It's not only a corporate scam, right? That's what we call here woke, right? It's like you can see all the companies, like all the major companies got some trans person, and now they're all crashing, right? We can talk about the Dylan Mulvaney
Yeah.
nonsense with Bud Light. And then
Mhm.
they just crashed because they were trying to be cool and hip. They're not paying attention to who their actual target market is. And that was like, oh, you people are so down. So many of these companies in the United States tried to latch on to the LGBT sort of space, right? And a lot of them are getting nailed now because they did that. But you're right. I totally believe it's become not so I'm a political movement now. Do you know how horrible that is? Like when I see it, it's like I'm not political movement. This is a mental disorder that I struggled with for many years, got it together, and I live a beautiful life now. That's what I want people to see. I don't want people to see those wingnuts over there ruining. I want them to see a person like me or us who get our stuff together and we participate in the world and I coexist with you and I pay my taxes and I want to be part of the world. I don't want to be separate from you. I want to sit at the table with you. They don't want to sit at the table with you. They want to own the table and they want to kick you out of the table. That's a whole political other space going on there. The indoctrination, the politicalization of my sort of space, and this sort of understanding that anyone can be LGBTQ. It's funny. LGBTQIA 2+ BIPOC. Like, I'm just like, wait a minute here. When are we stopping? So what does it become? It's not representing LGBT anymore. It's representing anyone. I don't even know, my friend, what it's even representing anymore.
Yeah, of course. I would just call it the LG HDTV 1080p.
I mean, or I think Blair White calls it the Wi-Fi password.
Yeah, it is becoming the white.
It really is, man.
Yeah. So I think there's certainly the wrong kind of affirmation, so to speak, the one that's being pushed by the I guess trans industrial complex, if you want to call it
Yes,
that way.
yes,
But
yes.
I think a kind of affirmation that I think children or adolescents going through
Mm,
what you went through as an adolescent should need, and I certainly think that you're in a position to give it, is that you can live a fulfilling life. Even if you carry this around with you, whether you
yeah,
choose to actually go through the transition process or not, you don't need to
yeah,
be a pawn in a political game or whatever. You
no,
can just live your life, and I think
yeah,
um, that is sorely lacking in the
yeah.
transosphere.
Thank you for seeing that. And it makes me sad because this just isn't a political space. It's a space that I struggled in, a space that I got my, for lack of a better word, shit together. And I moved forward and I became somebody. And it's so, I told you earlier on, I'm not an academic. I didn't graduate high school. I was always called dumb and stupid and you'll never amount to anything. Always, I had that sort of on my back. And that actually helped me become something because I was the guy that said, really watch this. So that's what I want people to see. The transness is over here, right? The transness, it's not something that I want everybody just to look at me as a trans man. I want people to see me as Buck, who created things and wants the world to be a better space. And I advocate for love and peace and coexistence and not necessarily, I don't I would say that I don't advocate necessarily for trans rights because I don't even know what that means. I advocate for human rights, and that means all of us should be able to have rights to live in this space. But when you start encroaching on other people's rights, that is where I pull the plug. And I'm like, so for example, I see trans women are women. No, they're not. Trans women are trans women, and there's nothing wrong with that. And in fact, when you say trans women are women, not only are you taking away the trans experience, which is different than a biological woman, right? But to me, it's making people feel ashamed to be trans. And that is a complete lie when everyone just hopped on board of this trans women or women. And the reason they hopped on it was because they were too scared to get hate and they were too scared to get pushback, which is why it gained so much momentum. And the other thing I just want to say real quick here is trans women are biological males, period. They're biological males. So if you look at most of this anger and resentment, and it's all coming from a very trans women space, a certain type of trans women, because they have been socialized as males and they come at it in a different way than somebody like myself who was socialized as a female. I lived half my life as a woman. And so if you really think about that, you can see it in the movement, and you can see the people who are putting all this ideological stuff out there are really pushing for children are trans women. You don't see a lot of trans male voices sort of pushing this narrative and this angry and this, cisgender people and renaming everybody else for you to make yourself feel better. And the anger is coming from a very specific group of trans women who are biological males.
Mhm. I certainly think that the contemporary feminist movement is going wrong
Mm,
in its
yeah, yeah,
dedication to advocacy for trans women
yeah,
who are not really up their ranks. I know that there are
no,
people who are pushing back against it. The
yeah.
thing about them is that they are not from the US. So I think you have like Megan Murphy from
Yeah,
Canada, and you have
I'm friends with Megan. Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
she's wonderful.
Yeah, she's wonderful, wonderful.
There's Kathleen Stock from the UK,
Friends with her too. Yep,
and I think there's Jermaine Greer from Australia.
yep,
He's like one of the most
excellent. And
vocal.
what's her name? Parker Posey, or what does
Posey
she go?
Parker. Yeah, she's
Posey
also
Parker.
British. And not to mention J.K. Rowling, who's
JK, all of them, all of them. I've created a conversation with all of them. Even JK, me and her talk. Like it's all a matter of how you come to it. And I do believe women rights are being taken away. I am a biological woman who fought for women's rights for many years. I'm not going to turn my back on that. No way. Especially when I see men who want to be women, which I don't care. Go ahead and be a woman. No one cares that I'm a woman who wants to be a man, right? Same thing. But in order to get respect, you've got to give respect. And I see them just the things they say about women, the nastiness, physical violence towards women. I'm like, I'm not going to be a part of that. That is not trans rights. That's misogyny at the height so they're under the label of trans rights. You see what they're doing? They're using trans rights as this way to be very misogynistic, and it's disgusting.
Oh yeah, and I think the feminist movement is like making a huge mistake, like including
That's
that
right.
in their ranks.
That's right. They're going to regret it. I've been here for a long time, friend, on this earth for 61 years. I got to this space because I am a person who believes in slow movement, right? When you go fast and you just don't think about you're going to mess up. But I learned from those mistakes. And now I just take things. I was like, okay, I'm cool. I'll be here in 2 years. Will you? I'll be here in 5 years. Will you? And everyone will be like, thank you, Buck. Thank you so much for speaking up for the kids. Now they hate me, but you watch. I have no doubt in my mind people will, because I'm bringing the stories like that girl I told you about who wished she never transitioned. She's gold. I'm telling you, she is going to amplify what me and you are saying right here, because she actually has the lived experience, right? I can say it till I'm blue in the face, but when you have an actual trans kid who grew up to 22 years old and regrets it and says, I have to help people not go down this road, that's where we're starting to get people to stand up and speak out against this. And that's what I'm saying. I can wait. I have only time on my hands. I'll wait here until all of this is done, because it will be. And all those people who backed all of this rhetoric, I have their names in a list. Just so you know.
I believe alongside yourself, I think if vindication is going to come, it's going to come for alongside the detransitioners also. I believe you've alluded to
That's
that.
right. Yep. Yep.
I think the most well known of the detransitioners, I believe, is Chloe Cole.
Yeah. It was a friend of
And
mine. Yep.
if there is any justice in the world, Chloe Cole's story should be heard and broadcasted the same way, if not more,
Yeah.
than Jazz Jennings' story.
Oh God. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
I mean, Jazz has been on the TV. I knew it. I saw it back in the day. I was a little bit concerned by it because I think she's been on for like 10 seasons or some
really.
insane amount. Is it 10 seasons? Something like that. And I was just like, okay, I get it. It's like kind of cool, but how are we actually amplifying this and making it seem as if so no, I think Jazz honestly was part of the situation where young people saw her and were like, I want to be a girl, I want to be a boy. Yeah, I definitely think it indoctrinated some and then parents. And then, I do believe that some Munchausen is happening. And I do believe some of these parents just want to have a trans kid because it's like kind of cool and awesome. And no one ever did that with gay kids. So that's what I want you to see too. I never saw that with gay kids. I never saw parents going, I have a gay kid. Woohoo. Let's put them all over the internet. Like now I only see it with the trans kids.
Hmm.
It's bizarre and weird.
Oh yeah. So,
Yeah.
final question, Buck. I hate to see this conversation ending, but
Me
I've
too.
had a
You're great.
I've had thoroughly good time. But yeah, one thing, one key factor that I find that's not, well, not being talked about amongst many others is this certain inability for, people who are trans
Mhm.
to feel comfortable with their own bodies. They
Mhm.
they demand and they hector for affirmation from you and I about,
Right.
well, what they've done to their bodies wrongly or not so, mostly wrongly, I think.
Yep.
But yeah, I think there's something for, non-trans people like myself can learn too. I think we should all need to be confident or comfortable living in our bodies. Is something that many have struggled with. So I'd like to hear from you how you've come to like terms with that.
Yeah, great question. And I think you're right. It's not just trans. Struggling with your body is not a trans only thing, right? A lot of people struggle with their bodies. Men, women, kids, like everyone struggles with their bodies. I struggled a lot with my body as a girl who always looked to I always saw men's bodies as like, I want that, right? Like GI Joe was my my idol when I was a kid. It's like I just wanted to be GI Joe. Like I want that man body. I don't want boobs. And it wasn't even the penis. I'll be honest with you. It was really just this physique, right? I'm very masculine, muscular, hyper male. So I just envisioned that on some level. And when I was a woman, I just became a very butch woman where people couldn't even tell whether or not I was a boy or a girl. And that helped a lot of my dysphoria. But what happened was that I could no longer sort of be in that. So as I became a man and started taking the testosterone, I started seeing these changes. There's this really important idea that I learned through sobriety, and I think it's called the serenity prayer, where it states, it states you can accept the things you can change the accept the things you cannot change and change the things you can on a kind of nutshell. That's what it says. And I realized through sobriety, I'm not going to be able to change everything. It's not going to happen. And I can change the things I can, which are I can grow a beard, right? And I could get my breasts removed and I can lift weights and I can get tattoos and I can look so manly, but my genitals, they're never going to change. And I think through that sobriety and through understanding and really knowing the things you can and the things you cannot change is a hugely important part of the process of transitioning, as well as understanding you as a person, right? You've got to learn to connect to the things you cannot change. And I learned to connect to the things I cannot change, and without having your need to validate me. And that is one of the most important lessons I've learned. And that's what these young people are not learning. They're learning that you have to validate them, that if you misgender them, that if you don't use their pronouns, that if you know what I mean, you're transphobic, you're the bigot. That's what they're being taught. And it's such a dangerous space to be taught that, because you're not taking responsibility for who and what you are, and you can't change your sex. important that people hear that from me, and that these young people start to hear that you will never change your sex ever. You will change your appearance. And by learning that very important part of transition, or even just a regular person out there, change the things you can and accept the things you can't. And it's real simple on some level.
Mhm. I think the issue of craving validation is also an issue that is
Yes.
outside of the trans framework too. In that, I know
Yeah,
that adolescents are are pushing themselves in this transgender road in order to
that's right.
crave validation from their peers.
Yes. Yes, I agree 100%. But you know what we have? This crazy thing, the phone, and apps and TikTok is the devil as far as I'm concerned. And I watch these people, they just go nuts on there, and they get, and that's all they have. Those are their friends, right? They're not going into the real world, which I advocate for. Get off of that, get into the real world, find friends in the real world, find people you can look in their eyes, find people who are not trans. Stop hanging around. You know, I don't hang out with trans people. I hang out with people, and this is the trap that they're getting put in. And they think that if they don't hang out with those, they do it because that's where they get their validation from, right? And I keep saying people will misgender you for the rest of your life. People misgender me all the time. I mean, clearly on purpose, because I look like a man. There's no way that I don't think anyone would know. But you know, people will just call me she because they're like, you didn't change her. And I don't care. And I think that comes from growth and maturity. I don't need your validation. If you want to call me she and it makes you feel better, you go right ahead. I know who I am. But the young people aren't learning that, which is a huge skill to learn. It's a skill. It's not it's not necessarily like one day you're going to wake up and the whole world is going to love you. There's always going to be people who dislike you and who you are and what you are. And it's not relegated to trans. That's just human nature.
Mhm. Well, on that wonderful note, thank you very much, Buck Angel,
Thank you.
for joining the
Thank you,
show.
friend. You're so awesome. Thank you.